So, I hope I can go on without interruption, but I think 15 minutes or so is quite good. It is still Saturday, the 18th of December 2021. I am reading BLISS Afterlife, and I finished with the last chapter entitled Holly Regained Her Peace, and we are now at chapter 19, entitled Bliss. I was in a happy state of utter contentment. It is a feeling I experienced very rarely when I was a physical being. It is always fascinating for me to look back and to consider my lives. The beauty of the physical experience and existence is so often not appreciated. It is a paradise that we are able to enjoy life in a body and all the lovely things which go with it, like eating and dancing and making love, but we are spending most of our allotted time worrying about everything. I was contemplating Alexei. Here we had a soul who had not had a very long physical life. 40 years he was, but 40 years of hard living. This time I was allocated the position of greeting souls who are young and whose remembrance is expected to take some time. It had taken time to find a familiar soul who would give solace to this new arrival, Alexei. It is usually an easy and enjoyable task to find a guide, but with Alexei we had to consult the old ones to find a familiar spirit who would give him comfort. There were a few people in Alexei's life who he would be glad to see after his death in his last existence, and unfortunately this was not the first time where he lost his way to values completely removed from a soul-conscious being. His grandmother had appeared at my side, and she said, "Alex, you found your match in lobster and vodka again, I see." I remembered his grandmother smiled at him then, and Alex was confused. It did take him a little bit of time to realize that he died. He had been celebrating his 2nd million, and he had tried to persuade his girlfriend to join him on a trip to Thailand. And he was actually saying he didn't like her. He didn't like her laugh, and he said it was so strange how he realized where he was, and he was glad to recognize his grandma, and he suddenly recognized that he was in the afterlife, and it didn't feel like hell. Anyway, we had been together for a while to work on this, and I had taken him already to the library, so his meeting with the elders went well, because he was already prepared by me. We are so attached to the material world that the purpose of our physical life is often totally misunderstood. I'm much more aware of the complexity again now, since I have come back here again. We are such lucky beings that we are able to return here and rest for however long we desire, taking in all the truths which are hidden from us on earth. Well, I think they are not really hidden, but we are immersed in society, whatever society we get born into. And many of our societies today are not allowing for the spiritual. It's called the New Age. This always made me laugh. There's nothing new about spirituality. We are funny lot, really. Sometimes I wish I could have seen life a little bit more like the game it is. Did I not like Shakespeare? And did he not say all life is a stage? He seemed to have known a thing or two, this old Shakespeare. He was very popular here as well, but he's gone on to a different sphere, and I don't see him anymore. He was already an old soul in the 16th century. The seamless transition from life to death to life is such a wonderful progress that it seems a bit of a pity that our physical existence is so often such a struggle. We've made the world a difficult place to be happy, because almost everywhere now happiness has been associated with material wealth. Of course, here, as a soul, it is very different. We have the time to contemplate and to rest, and this is what I shall do now. Next chapter. Susan. Susan had been unusually low. She was generally a really optimistic person, but the people she had in her refuge since early September were not the easiest. She had 25 places in this big sprawling house. They had converted every nook and cranny to a bedroom, and what was once a rather grand residence had become a haven for the bullied and worse. She had had so many people, women and children really, coming through these doors in the last 15 years. Sometimes her goodwill was sorely tried. Some women are by far their own worst enemies. But still, after all these years, she knew that this safe place saved many lives and many minds. She had been worrying particularly about a young girl who had turned up over a week ago. She had been 2 months pregnant, but had a miscarriage and had come here just after she had left the hospital. They had found her drunk, covered in blood, near Waterloo Station. She had been here for a few days now, and the dark mood which had clung to her ever since she arrived seemed not to lift at all. Susan decided to ask her friend Evelyn to come over tomorrow night. She was a really skillful therapist, and even though Evelyn had her own practice, she was always generous with her help here. It did not pay very much, but she did it anyway. She was a real mensch. And sometimes it helped just to talk to her. Many women who came here had no serious mental problems, apart from very low self-esteem and the relentless bullying, and more from their partners. A conversation with Evelyn was always helpful and often did the trick in opening some eyes. Susan walked around the house chatting here and there. Natalie was in the green room, but all was quiet, and she just called good night through the door, which was answered with a grunt. Chapter 21. Natalie. Natalie remembered how she had got her now. Well, she remembered waking up after a long night's sleep, a night and a day really. Suzanne had brought her some soup and they had talked for a long time. She was not blessed with luck. It always seemed that at any instance, whatever could go wrong did actually turn out to be bad in her life recently. Natalie had left home 10 days ago when she had missed her period. She knew she was pregnant, and there was no way Roger, her mum's boyfriend, was going to put up with that. Her mum was so besotted with him. With what? That Natalie could never understand. That it would have just ended up in another long, violent argument. She told Suzanne that she had decided to leave, packed as much as she could into her rucksack and went off. Natalie had tried to get in touch with Peter, the father, but he was unavailable. She did not have the energy to try and get him involved. She regretted ever having slept with him. It had not been very nice anyway. He was a moron, really. Anyhow, she felt she got what she deserved, a whole load of more trouble. She managed to get the last 100 quid out of her savings account and took the coach to London. When she was sitting on the coach, she realized that she had not thought this through very well at all. She only knew one person in London, an old school friend. Come to think of it, she had an argument with her last year when they left high school. Nicola was moving to London and Natalie had felt deserted. They had been friends since they were at primary school. Natalie always felt slightly inferior to Nicola. Her family was so nice. Nicola was always having a chat with my mum, and often when Natalie was visiting their house, which was all the time from when she was about 11, she was sitting with the whole family talking about how everybody felt about this and that. And Nick's mum was the best cook ever. Somehow it was Nicola she wanted to see. Pregnant and not even 18. It looked like she had ended up exactly where her stepfather always said she would. Oh, how she loathed him. It was almost too textbook to be true. He'd been coming accidentally into her room since she was 8. She was sure he would hover outside just to burst in when she was undressing. There were no locks in the house. She never remembered where and when they had gone. Anyhow, he never got near her. She made sure of this. But his intentions were always clear. He was a bloody leech. Always trying it on with her. Every opportunity he had when alone with her was spent with innuendos. It was totally wearing, and her mother would not hear of it. She had stopped trying to talk to her about it because she always ended up feeling worse afterwards. Anyway, when she arrived at Victoria Station, she felt awful. She must have fainted because all she remembered was waking up in a hospital bed. She had lost the baby. She felt the darkness surrounding her every thought. Never had she felt so miserable. She had been able to leave the bed early after a few days and had gone outside with a few of the other shadows. They had a lot to drink, and all she remembered was going along with one of the guys. She has no recollection of what exactly happened, but she remembered falling and hitting her leg. Anyhow, somehow somebody found her and she was delivered to this refuge. It took a while to piece it all together, but this is how she ended up with Suzanne. She had been here some days now, and she still had this cloud of misery firmly around her shoulders. She had rung home just before Christmas, but her mum had been really horrible. It seemed that now, with her gone, the household had been so peaceful. It seemed impossible to go back. Baby or no baby did not matter anymore. Natalie had been collecting sleeping tablets for ages. Even at home, she had emptied her mother's medicine cabinet weeks ago, and when she was in hospital, the nurses always asked her, "Something to help you sleep?" Natalie never said no, but saved the pills every night. She had about 100 mixed tablets, and she had decided that she really did not want to see another day. This Tuesday was the day she had chosen to die. It was strange how resolved she felt about this. To have a future without further worry seemed to her more desirable than anything else. She never managed to get hold of Nicola, and somehow nothing mattered anymore. It seemed the easiest thing in the world would be just to take the tablets. She had locked herself into her room after breakfast. It was cold and a grey, windy morning. It had never got really light, and it did not look as if the sun would ever shine again. After lighting the few candles she had collected in her room, she got out the small bottle of whiskey she had in her holder. She got all the tablets and spread them out on the covers. She made herself a cup of tea and decided to write a note to Suzanne. I think I'll stop this here. Have a good Saturday.